Hey guys, welcome back to the Black Accountant. It's your boy Mo, and today I wanted to talk a little bit about. Oh wait, before all that, don't forget to like, subscribe, and comment of any kind of content you want to see going forward. So today I wanted to talk a little bit about racism. You know, racism is particularly the racism, the different, particularly the difference between racism and ignorance. In today's society, if anybody seems to open their mouth about anything in terms of stereotypes, in terms of an opinion about something, if it doesn't automatically match the given narrative, then nobody's willing to listen to it, you know? And there's this finger pointing that happens so often of just like, hey, you're racist, shut up, or you're a bigot. When in reality, that person may not know better or may hold on to those views because um, because they never got the opportunity to discuss those views or really compare those ideas or that ideology to anybody else's and really understand what the general premise or what the general issue is. And actually, it's actually also counterintuitive to silence people when they have negative opinions or different opinions, because by forcing them to be quiet, you're actually fostering more hatred, because a person decides to develop more and more hateful feelings towards that minority or towards that group or towards that subject or people of that subject. So anyway, my point here is that from what I've noticed, because during my college experience, after my college experience, I was primarily in a white dominant major, and the other minorities that were in that really overshadowed to the point where I was the only black person in my major, which was accounting. And until one other black individual kind of just came about later on in my last few years, like in my last 2 years or so at the college. Um, so you find yourself surrounded by all these people and you have these friends, but your friendships are at a shallow level because you can never fully be yourself around people. And what I mean by that is, I most people, when the issue doesn't fully affect them or have any effect in their daily lives, they don't really do the bother to do the research or bother to really understand your position in terms of where you're coming from. So let me give a basic example here. So I like to listen to rap and hip hop music. And I really like explicit versions, because I don't really like censored music. It just doesn't sound right. It just throws off the meaning, And this music was primarily, mostly created with black people in mind or black sound in mind, And I wouldn't listen to that music around my campus friends or my college friends because I didn't want to enable them to say, the N word. Because a lot of times people look for that cue from you to see if you're agreeable enough or not. Or they want to befriend you as well just to have like that stereotypically cool black friend or just the black friend overall. And literally, it's annoying because they approach you with this stereotype in mind that you really need to fit, as in, like, you have to like rap music. I do happen to like rap music. You need to like either be sassy or bossy or something along those lines, which are roles typically reserved for like the black female friend. But for the black guy friend, either you're like a flamboyant gay black guy, or you're the or you're the token friend or token relationship black guy, just to say that you dated one or just to say that you have a friend that is one, and it tries to confine you into the space of like a bunch of different stereotypes of black people. If you need to like this type of food, you need to look like this, you need to do this and that. And at the same time, You have the campus pressure and like the major itself, since it is predominantly white, to fit into that aesthetic as well, you know. And with these things come explanations, and it's a matter of whether or not the person wants to sit there and listen to you talk about the issue. And what I mean by that is, like, say I had an afro at some point, you know, and it was really, really big. And I would walk in with that. And I remember walking into this guidance counselor who we have or had when I was still a college student there. And he took one look at me and said, "You need to cut that," you know. And I didn't necessarily get offended by it. And I really hate that whole idea of just being offended by everything, because it just creates this victim mentality where, you know, you can never grow or you can never have discussions with anybody because like you hang on every little word and let that person's words really affect you personally. Anyway, so I walked in there, he told me I needed to cut it, and he would always try to relate to me through other supposed black figures that had very entirely different situations than myself, as if I wouldn't understand an example of a regular person. And this person would always try to make themselves seem as if they're part of your struggle rather than trying to understand it. And it was a very, very interesting experience because I started to question myself in terms of where do you fit into this diaspora? You know, how do I showcase myself with my personality and who I am as an individual without having to conform to a certain look or to a specific stereotype or to a specific type of function thing. Granted, people say if you go into the corporate world, you have a corporate personality just because that's the nature of things. But I can never do that because I'm just not great at faking things. For me, anything I approach, like if it feels bad to the soul for me where I have to pretend that I like you or pretend to do this and that, it's gonna show on my face regardless of how much I want to fake it, you know. So I'd rather go about things in the most genuine to me way possible. But anyway, back to the topic at hand. You know, when it comes down to it, between racism and ignorance, some people would assume or say that being ignorant is a form of racism because you are purposefully or even unpurposefully choosing not to acknowledge or understand the pain of others around you for inclusivity. But I always come with this question in mind because me as a Black individual, I have to know white culture. I have to know white people so that you fit into that structure. But I don't do the same for my Asian friends necessarily. I don't do the same for my Middle Eastern friends or for my other type of friends because it's not a lived experience for me. Like I understand their stories and I'll listen to that and make my understanding based off of that because I'm somebody that can empathize or have empathy. And that's all that's really asked here, you know? But I think the reason it's so different with Blackness and Black people is because of the history and the tension and a lot of the events that unfolded. And a lot of times people present this argument of nobody alive today is responsible for slavery. While that may be true in its words and in all that, the system that was created during that time still exists. And what this marginalization means is people that are Black tend to be pushed out to areas that are cheaper. So let me put this in a bigger picture because a lot of times people like to tout this stupid statistic of 13% of the population, like 52 or 53% of the crime. So let's talk about that. You know, let's say in this world, there's a Black guy, right? His parents can't get a job because of their name. Okay, say they did get a job, but it's a very mediocre job that pays very little, you know? So you're already limited there. And then because of that, because your salary or your income is so low, you need to live in a cheaper area where you typically get pushed out to the slums or to very specific areas for low income individuals. Okay, you can't make ends meet. You can't get a job because nobody wants to hire you. Say now you have to start taking out loans. You take out loans, you default on your loans because you don't have the means to pay those loans. So what do you need to resort to? Now you have a kid at home, you have a family, let's assume in this scenario. Now you need to go steal, and based on a lot of prejudices that not only police have, but based on the system and a lot of stereotypes that are perpetuated in media, the police officer or whoever it is assumes that you're just a criminal right off the bat all the time. In this case, this example that I'm using, this person is a criminal, but you don't know if it's their first attempt or first crime or their billionth or whatever. But the police officer in their mind is already thinking about approaching this person in an escalated manner, rather than this is a person, this is an isolated situation, this is not a whole racist thing, right? So then they end up escalating using force, Same thing happens when you go to your trial or you go to court, you get handed these very, very unfair sentences that don't match the crime. It usually gets escalated based on biases and based on a lot of other factors. Now this person is serving a long time in prison. And why do we keep popping people into prison? Well, because that's a whole other story for corporate and the cheap labor cost of prisoners. So the more incarcerations, while it is expensive to feed and clothe and house these people, to keep these people in jails and fed and alive is somewhat costly. The labor that they provide for contracted companies is pretty cheap and for pennies literally on the hour versus whatever they would have to pay somebody as a regular wage. So I would just urge people to really think about things in the large scheme of things, and rather than just going strictly based off of statistical data, that doesn't necessarily make you smart. It also doesn't necessarily make you any less ignorant, because you're negating the entire lived experience of the system, of the experience, in preference of what's literally written on paper. Same way that somebody who really doesn't know how prisons work, or somebody who really doesn't know how any kind of system works, understands how it works in theory, and ideally it works in theory, but in practice, the results are completely different. Anyway, let me know what your thoughts are on this topic in the comments below. I feel like I might have rambled on a little bit and then kind of digressed from the point a couple of times, but it is a really expansive issue that's a little bit hard to narrow down into just one thing. So let me know what your thoughts are in the comments. Don't forget to like, subscribe. All right, see you next time.